I'm just gonna say it. Wonder Woman 1984 was not that bad. I went in expecting something worse than Suicide Squad based on what everyone had told me, and it was okay. It was kind of long, and let's just all collectively agree to pretend that the Steve Trevor body snatcher thing never happened, but I've seen worse, and I know that sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise, but I've seen worse. I want to talk about the action though, because that is what we do here. Hi, I'm Jill Bearup. I like to pretend to hit people in my free time, and I make videos about fights in media. And those action scenes, boy, they also happened, I guess. The bare bones plot of Wonder Woman 1984 goeth thusly. There's a wishing stone, which, like the monkey's paw, will grant your wish but take something vital from you. Barbara wants to be Diana but loses her kind personality, and then wants to be an apex predator and ends up looking like a member of the Cats cast. Whatever, I guess. Diana wishes for Steve back, and there he is, but she's progressively losing her godlike powers. Max Lord turns himself into the wishing stone, but he's kind of dying, and also his son, you know, wishes he wouldn't do that, but he had his wish already, so that's not going to fly. The fight scenes and action scenes are not great. From a choreography perspective, they're not terrible or anything, but they feel, in sharp contrast to most of the scenes in Wonder Woman, absolutely weightless. There is no heft there. No matter how much they do with the makeup to try and make us feel like Diana is suffering and bleeding and injured, the cartoon physics undermines the gravity of the situation. The original Wonder Woman, even though Diana was a demigoddess, even in the scenes where it's just two gods smashing the snot out of each other, managed to keep its feet on the ground to a much greater extent. We're going to say that was an intentional pun as well, but the problem is not the flying. The problem is the floating and the landing. My favourite action scene in the movie is actually the very first one with the Amazons and little Diana. Love little Diana. Sure, we open with some Philosopher's Stone Quidditch match levels of CGI, and a lot of the gymnastics at the start of the race is a little bit overly gravity-defying, but for the most part things have heft and it feels like gravity works. Sure, the Amazons are so powerful that they can climb ropes without their legs and perform dives that may well be higher than the world record in the middle of their pentathlon equivalent, but that's fine. We do accept that they are somewhat supernaturally empowered warriors, and we also accept that Diana, the god killer, is even more supernaturally empowered, to the point that she's prepubescent but she can still keep up and might even win. To keep us grounded, there are real horses, there's water, and they struggle through it, they shoot arrows, they throw spears, they climb stuff, and things mostly feel like they really exist, regardless of whether or not they actually do. The mall scene directly afterwards is, well, I see how you're going for the whole campy 80s vibe. I mean, the whole movie is drenched in the 80s aesthetic, and I love it. I especially love Diana's outfits. But the physics is off in a way that makes me uncomfortable. And it remains off for most of the rest of the film. There are moments of this in the scene with the Amazons where the CGI is a little bit too obvious and the gymnastics are a little bit too clean for a rough and tumble race, but here's where we really get into it. It feels instinctively wrong for him to fly straight back like this when Diana pushes him. Particularly as there is no roll or pitch or yaw at all. He's just like, he gets pulled back like he's on a wire, which is exactly what's happening, but ideally you don't want it to feel like that. The reason that the wrist cross at the end feels more realistic than this is because the guy who tumbles out of the watchtower does so in a tumbling kind of way. He doesn't just slide back, he actually falls end over end. The magic god power feels more plausible than this. And I know that it's being played for comedy, but there's comedy and then there's too ridiculous, and I feel like we've tipped over into too ridiculous at this point. In addition to that, the pulls through the air about half the time don't feel like she weighs anything. You don't get the sense that she's supporting all of her weight on this one arm that she's holding onto the lasso of truth with. It feels like she's floating when she lets go, and she lands far too lightly. If I jump in the air and land, my landings are heavier than that, even when I'm trying to land softly. At some point I may talk some more about Star Wars and the lightsaber fights in that, including Mustafar, just to say, I have some opinions. But say what you like about their hilarious spinning. When Anakin kicks Obi-Wan and he lands, regardless of how he travels through the air, it feels like he lands. He doesn't daintily step out of the air like he's getting off an escalator. When Diana jumps out of the trenches in the original Wonder Woman, it feels like she has actually done that, even though the jump is far in excess of anything you would expect from a human. The landing is still a proportionate landing for someone who weighs as much as a human does. I know that she's going to learn to fly later in the film, but I feel like if we'd had a more realistic, if you will, swing and run and jump in the setup, it would have felt more impactful when she actually learned to fly properly. You could argue that one either way, to be honest. The other thing though is her movement is distinctly weird in places. Wonder Woman just slides towards these two baddies like, how? Pulling the guns out of their hands, fine. Crushing the guns, fine. She is super strong, we kind of expect that. But what's with the cha-cha slide? I know she's in a shopping mall, but surely her stupid wedge-heeled sandal things aren't that slippery? I'm sorry, I'm still not over the shoes. See, also when she gets out of the car and runs, that does not feel like that is how that should have worked from a physical perspective. It doesn't feel real. Or possibly real is not quite the right word, it doesn't feel plausible. Almost all of her running feels really fake, actually. Possibly it's the slow motion, but it just feels off. There's also a scene where she shoves herself on a piece of metal through a gap under a truck while it's moving. Twice, I think. And I don't think that's how that works. You can feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think the interaction with the metal and the road would be sufficiently frictionless to make that work the way it works in the film, even if you do have super strength. Granted, the bits with the cars mostly feel real and plausible and weighty, with some exceptions, but when Steve crashes into a truck, climbs out the windscreen, and somehow the car is still attached even though it's no longer accelerating and the truck is still moving, are they stuck together? Let's just assume that they're stuck together. The White House fight feels somewhat more grounded, even with the peppy 80s color grade. I love the peppy 80s color grade though. But there are still some moments where you're thinking, is that how ropes work though? Even magic ropes. Having Steve punching things in the background in a somewhat more realistic manner does help. Also in this scene there's a giant stone pillar which bounces like it's made of polystyrene. Yeah. Look, ignore the colours. The no man's land scene doesn't feel real because everything's kind of greyish. It feels real because things have actual physical consequences, even if Diana is strong enough to overcome them. So this look at how messed up her slightly too glossy wig is, look at the shadows under her eyes and the blood on her, is undermined by the two of them skidding around in their giant clomping heels and nothing feels like it really lands. When we get to the final fight with Cheetah and Diana's dramatic golden eagle armour entrance, she sweeps through with the wings and these two guys fly sideways. Everyone has their own level of reality bending they're prepared to accept. But there comes a point where people just stop being interested in something because even if it's not on a conscious level, some part of their brain just doesn't believe it. If you don't have a language for talking about fights, then you maybe can't explain why something isn't working for you, but if your brain doesn't believe what's happening, it's just not going to be enticing. If it feels fake or it feels pointless, then it just becomes boring. And while a huge part of the feeling it is the setup and the emotional beats, another big part of it is making it feel like it could be real in the context of the world that you're in. If Diana can fly, great. But if Diana can't fly yet, she shouldn't land like she's gently stepping off a podium. She shouldn't swing like she's not supporting all of her weight on one arm. She shouldn't flip a truck end over end even if it is possible for her to jump above it in a mighty leap. And not all of these problems happen 100% of the time all the way through the film. There are lots of shots where it feels like she's swinging, where it feels like things have weight, where it feels like physics works correctly. And it's not a terrible film. It's overstuffed and overly long and there are a couple of plot points we could probably have just done without, but I would watch it again. It's just not a good example of how to shoot superhero action convincingly. I don't care that the magical lasso has decided that it can hook itself onto water vapor or disturbed electrons. That does not bother me. Like, magic. Okay. But I do care when it seems like the characters don't weigh anything. And while I'm not really a fan of the 3-point superhero landing, I know it looks cool but it's kind of hard on the body, Wonder Woman is functionally invulnerable, at least at the start and end of the film. If anyone can slam their knee into concrete to look badass, it's her. Even if she is wearing those giant galumphing sandals. Sorry, I will stop talking about it at some point. And if you haven't already, subscribe for future videos because I've got my 10th anniversary of video making coming up, which is quite exciting. See you next time.